Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Meui here, back with another first Descendant video. And for this video, we're going to be going over the Enzo build that I've been working on. Now, I'm going to cover a setup for both solo play and group play because there is a couple of different changes that you're going to want to make for that, but it is extremely strong for both. The solo build is going to let you solo whatever you need to solo in the game. The group build is going to make it so that your group runs on bosses or dungeons or whatever you're doing are a lot better, and you're going to be buffing your teammates 24/7 and making them just a lot stronger, as well as yourself. This character is extremely strong and may end up being my new main character, especially for bossing, because it just makes the group stuff a lot easier, and in solo he can just melt anything by himself. And before I get into the build itself, I'm going to show you guys the Transcendent module, explain how that works, and then show you guys a couple mechanics with that, because there's some weird behaviors and some hidden numbers there. So for the Transcendent module, you're absolutely going to want to run a supply Firearm Enhancer, or basically anything you're doing with Enzo currently. What this does is makes it so that your Q is now giving everybody that picks it up extra weak point damage and extra crit rate. It gives a ton. This is absolutely the mod you're going to want. Unfortunately, the only way to actually get this module is to get it from an ultra precise encrypted vault from Vespers or White Knight Golds. Now you can get them on normal mode or hard. I don't know if there's a different drop rate. I don't know the exact drop rate either. I've heard some people get it pretty quickly and some people have really bad luck with it. This is the only way to get it. Unfortunately, you can't combine for it. All right, so let's look at how this module actually works real quick. We're going to check my critical hit rate here on the Enduring Legacy, and you can see it is 30.66%, and my weak point hit is going to be 1.092. If I put this down, pick it up, we'll go back, and you can see my crit rate is now 75%, and my weak point is now 1.242. So we got about 45% crit rate there. Now, one important thing to note that isn't really clearly stated on the module itself is that you actually lose the buff after reloading, so it applies to the magazine that you have it on. So you can see I have two buffs on the left here. It is the buff on the right. If I shoot a couple shots here and then I reload, you're going to see that buff goes away, and I'm going to have to place it and pick it up again. With that in mind, one important thing with Enzo is that you're going to have a lot better time with a gun that has a very large magazine size, because you won't have to put that down as much, so you're not going to have as much downtime. But luckily for us, we have a weapon called the Enduring Legacy. This is, in my opinion, the absolute best weapon that you can use on Enzo. I do have a video with a build on that, so if you guys need a build for that, check that out. I would absolutely recommend using the Enduring Legacy, and I'm actually going to go over separate setups for if you are using the Enduring Legacy versus if you're using any other weapon, because there's a way to completely min-max this build around the Enduring Legacy for both the solo setup and the group setup. So I'm going to go over all that stuff, but I would absolutely recommend using this weapon if you have it. Whether you have all the copies or not, it is super strong on Enzo, and I will show you guys that with some examples. Now, the other important aspect of this build is actually your ultimate, and I'll show you what that does. Essentially, your ultimate is going to give your allies constant ammo. So that is the supply bullets that you see there. It's going to supply them 7% of their max ammo every 1.5 seconds. Very, very nice. It basically means everyone's going to have infinite ammo all the time. Now, the other amazing thing about this is that it also gives 20% firearm attack increase, another 20% to our crit, and faster reload time. So we absolutely want to work this into the build itself. Now, it has nothing to do with the Transcendent mod, but it's an extremely powerful ability that we want to be able to use. And I'll show you the crit rate here when I have both this active and the ultimate. Now, we know it was 75%, so now it's 85% crit rate, from a 30% to an 85% crit rate. And with this build, you are going to have 100% uptime on this. Now, one last thing before I get into the build itself, there's some weird mechanics surrounding the ultimate. So essentially, when you use it, it is going to apply to people around you and give them the buff. However, if we take a look here again, you can see that nowhere on the ability does it say that it has a range on how far it's applying the buff to your teammates. However, there is a hidden value where there's actually range on this. Now, I did test it, and the range, the base range on it is pretty good. I can't give you an exact number, but it seemed like it was between 30 and 40 meters. But when you're doing a boss fight, this is not going to always be enough. Teammates may be very far away. So because of that, in group play, you are going to want to try to get some sort of ability range. That's going to get it up to like the 60 to 80 meter range. Again, I don't know the exact range, but that will basically cover as much range as you could possibly need. So that is a hidden number that is on this, and shout out to my viewer Deft Punk for informing me of that. Now, the other weird thing with this ability is that when you use it, your teammates mods that have skill duration on them actually stack on top of it. It's very strange, but if you see here right right now I have 11.7 second duration. If I use this ability and my teammates have a bunch of duration mods, it's gonna last like 15 to 16 seconds for them. So it does stack your duration mods and then it stacks theirs on top of it. It does not say that it does this anywhere on the ability. I don't know if it's intentional, but it's something important to keep in mind because it means you're not going to be synced up with them at all times. And the last important thing to know about this ability is that if you try to use it too quickly before it is done casting, it is not going to do anything. And sometimes it'll also take your cooldown while not doing anything. So you have to actually wait until the drone does its little explosion at the end before you can recast the ability. So I've taken that into account with these numbers to make sure that you don't accidentally press it and get that overlap and mess up your cooldowns. But yeah, that is it as far as mechanics go. So now we can get into the build itself. Now, depending on the content you're doing, there is 2 different component sets that you're going to want to be using. Now, if you don't have the Frozen Heart set, which does come from Frostwalker, then you're just going to want to stick with the other set, which is the Annihilation set, and that comes from the Devourer. But I just want to go over those 2 sets real quickly before we get into the builds because they are important to the builds themselves. And I'll show you guys my components later on when we go over the reactor and stuff. So for group play, you're going to want to be using the Frozen set, and that is because it's going to give you a firearm weak point buff and a firearm crit buff as you're buffing your teammates throughout the fight. It just gives you a lot of that extra damage. It's really nice, and it also gives you skill cooldown. Now, this is just if you are trying to completely min-max your group play. This set is not completely necessary at all. If you don't have it, you'll just simply want to run the Annihilation set. It's going to give you a little bit of extra duration on your abilities, and you'll get that extra firearm attack if you take some damage. So this is also a fantastic set. Now, you may be asking about something like the veteran set. I did take a look at this set and I looked at the numbers of it at level 100, and this set is just way too squishy. You can use it for speed running, but that is about the only reason I would use that set. The TLDR here is Frozen Heart for group play, Annihilation for solo play. If you don't have Frozen Heart, totally okay, just use Annihilation. And now let's get into the modules themselves. So first I'm going to be going over the group setup and the solo setup for the Enduring Legacy side of the build, and then I'll be going over the group setup and the solo setup for any other weapons that you want to use this build with. And we'll start with the group setup for the Enduring Legacy. So ideally with this setup, you'll be using the Frozen Heart set, but again, if you don't have it, just use the Annihilation set. So obviously we have our Transcendent mod, I already went over that. For this, you can pick whatever you want. I like using long distance maneuvering for bossing. It helps to grapple onto different weak points from much further away. I think this is the best bossing one, but again, use whatever you guys like. Then we're obviously going to take increased HP. This is our baseline survivability. Now there is going to be plenty of flex options to make you more tanky. Now, because this build is centered around firearm attack damage and that you yourself will also be doing a ton of damage, if you have shot focus, it is fantastic. Now, I know a lot of people don't have this mod. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go into flex options here, but just as a quick flex option, if you don't have it, you could throw in something like Stim Accelerant and get extra HP. But again, I will go into all the flex options for this when we get through the actual base modules. Now, the next mod is going to be Maximize Conservation. This is because we are focused around making our cooldowns very short and having 100% uptime on everything. That means we're going to be spending a lot of mana, so we definitely want to take Maximize Conservation so that we can use mana as much as we need it throughout the content that we're doing, whether it's bossing or something else. And the skill power modifier does not matter because this build is not centered around skill power or using your ability damage whatsoever. And because we're shooting for 100% uptime on our ultimate ability, we're going to be taking Nimble Hands as our baseline for skill cooldown. And then also Strong Mentality to get a little bit more off our skill costs. Now, this is also going to have some flex options that I will get into, but I recommend just sticking with Strong Mentality. This is going to cut along with Maximize Conservation 50% of your mana cost. It's going to make it a lot easier to manage your mana throughout boss fights and things like that. Now, our next 2 mods you can see here are not leveled up at all, and that is because we do not need the skill power. Like I said, this has nothing to do with ability damage, so we are simply putting these in so that we can get the extra cooldown from them, which is a total of 12%. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but it's actually very important to having 100% uptime on our ultimate ability with this build. And the other nice thing is it saves us some catalysts. And the next mod we're going to be using is MP Conversion. This is the biggest cooldown reduction you can get in the game, so obviously we want to take this, especially with our ult being a base cooldown of 90 seconds. This is going to chunk off about 30 seconds of that, so it's a very important mod to have. And then we also are going to want to take a little bit of duration to make sure that we have 100% uptime here. And then the last mod we have here is Skill Expansion. Again, like I said, there's a hidden value on our ultimate, and it actually has a range on it on how far it affects our allies. So we take skill expansion if we are doing group play, and typically with group play, again, you are going to want to use the frozen heart set. Now, if you are doing solo play, you will want to swap to the Annihilation set, and you're also going to want to drop this. You're no longer going to need it to reach your allies, and then you can throw on something like increased defense. So pretty easy swap there. All right, and now I'm going to show you guys the gameplay loop of using this setup with the Enduring Legacy, because it is a little bit different than using it with other weapons. You're going to start the fight by putting your canister down, and you're going to ult and just mag dump. And as that comes to an end, you're going to start reloading. Ideally, cancel your reload with your one, and then you're going to ult again and mag dump once more. And the way I have this build set up is so that everything is going to align perfectly for you so that you can do this on repeat. And even if you don't cancel the actual reload, you don't have to. It's just if you really want to min-max, again, just do the same thing. And as you're using your ultimate throughout the fight while doing this, your teammates are going to get that buff as well. If you're using the frozen set and you're not using the Enduring Legacy, this is a setup that you're going to want to take here. Now, the only change we're really making here is that we're now going to be using MP Accelerant instead of, as you can see, the maximized duration from our other setup. Now, the reason we're actually cutting duration out is because it gives us that perfect amount of downtime between our ult to where we don't accidentally cast it and end up canceling the cooldown. And I'll show you guys that in a second here. Now, as for the module here, if you're using this in a group scenario, which if you're using the frozen set, you would be in a group scenario, you're going to want to obviously use skill expansion. Again, you can change that to defense if you're having survivability issues, but that's the only changes you really need to make here. So let me show you real quick how this works with this ultimate. So you can see I have the frozen set on. I'm going to pop the ultimate here, and I'm just going to spam it on cooldown, and you'll see it actually has 100% uptime pretty much, even though there's about a 3-second gap between the duration and the cooldown. So it pops there, and then we reactivate it. If you try to reactivate it while it's doing that shot, or even before that, it's not going to work, and you have to keep spamming the button. It's really annoying. So this way makes it much more fluid. All right, and then the last setup is going to be with the Annihilation set in solo play, and I know this one looks a little weird. It's a little different. We have a lot more duration. And the reason for that is because we've lost about 5% cooldown on our actual components themselves. So if you look over here, the cooldown is now 16.7 seconds. So we kind of have to make up that gap by adding in more duration if you're using the Annihilation set, so that we still have that ultimate that has 100% uptime and flows perfectly. The reason the skill extension is not at the max level is because, again, we want to try to get that exact amount of time between the duration and the cooldown, which is about 2.5 to 3 seconds, where we can just spam the ability, still keep 100% uptime, and not accidentally overlap. So if you can do that, you definitely want to try to get skill extension at this level. But if you don't have an extra or don't have the means to do so, you can just put max skill extension. You just need to be a bit careful when you're recasting the ultimate to make sure that it has fully ended before you cast it again. And I'll show you guys this one as well real quick. We'll pop our ult. I'm just going to spam the button, and you can see there it flows perfectly. All right, guys, and now I'm going to get into some flex options, and these are pretty universal to all of these builds here. So if you look across our builds, we have things like shot focus, strong mentality, as well as this slot here that is quite flexible. You can see a lot of things are pretty consistent across the build, so we're going to use those as our actual flex slots. So first and foremost, we're going to look at the shot focus spot, because a lot of people don't have this mod. Again, this is if you are just trying to get the most out of the damage from this build, but you may need more survivability, or you may just not have the mod. So we have lots of different flex options here for that. So one option, pretty easy, is simply swapping in the stim accelerant. That's going to give you a lot more health. So if you need that extra health, or you just don't have shot focus, this is a great choice. However, you are going to lose some mana by putting this in. So if you aren't happy about losing the mana, there is another choice. You could also use HP amplification. I don't have this enhanced right now, but you will lose some shield, but you'll actually gain about the same amount of HP as stim accelerant. So you can throw that in as well as an option if you're having mana issues. In the case that you are using the frozen set, I would not recommend this for the Annihilation set, but the frozen set actually comes with quite a bit of shield on it. So you can actually flex in increased shield here. It's not bad at all. And if you look at your 3 ability, it actually regens your shield. Now this is going to cost you extra mana, and typically you want to try to save your mana to be able to keep using your ultimate and your supply Firearm Enhancer, but that is an option if you want. And then as a last flex option, kind of a mod that is quite slept done is auto immunity. Now, when you max this out, it's going to end up being around 10.5%. This damage is basically reduced after all your different resists are applied. So it's a flat reduction to the actual damage that you end up taking. So if something ends up hitting you for 1,000 after all your resists, it's going to take 10% straight off of that and hit for around 900. So this mod is actually super strong and it is a viable option here. Now, I would typically recommend just going with an HP option. However, if you do want to go with an HP option, but you still want to use auto immunity, you can actually drop strong mentality if you're not having so much issues with the mana itself. And then you could throw auto immunity in this slot here. And that would let you get both HP mods as well as having auto immunity. And keep in mind, again, this is universal across all the builds here. And then like I mentioned, this socket here is pretty flexible. If you have defense, you can swap that to skill expansion. Now you only obviously want to use skill expansion in group play, but I would highly recommend it if you can. And if you are using skill expansion, you could swap that to increase defense or something else in that spot to help with survivability. Now, the only build you can't really get away with that unless you want some downtime between your ultimate, which then again makes it feel kind of awkward, is the normal build with Annihilation. Now, again, you could drop this if you want to and put something like defense, but you can see here we now have a 5-second gap. So there is going to be a bit of downtime, about 1.5 to 2 seconds downtime before you can actually use your ultimate again. So just something to keep in mind with that, but you can flex in increased defense there if you want to. Could swap in agony here for strong mentality, and that is pretty much it for the flex options. Now let's get into the gear itself. For the reactor, the substats are extremely important on this. However, as you can see, nothing else on the reactor is actually important. The reason for this is because we aren't using this for any sort of ability damage of any sorts, so we just want these substats themselves, meaning you can farm the reactor wherever you want. Me personally, I got it just doing the Valby circles, but wherever you want to go and get it, you want to definitely try to get a gold roll on skill duration and a gold roll on skill cooldown. If you are able to get this, you can use this reactor for every single build that I showed you. Now, if you for whatever reason can't get a gold cooldown, gold duration, if you can get one with gold cooldown at the very least, and then something like skill costs would be good, or ability range, because again it applies to your ultimate, those are also okay. But if you want things to line up perfectly like I have showed you so far, you want to try to get a gold duration and cooldown reactor, and this will actually be good for multiple descendants who have similar setups where you're trying to get like 100% uptime on something. So this is just a good reactor to have anyways, but you must have at least the cooldown part. I would suggest just trying to get both. It shouldn't take too long because again you can farm this anywhere. Now, I'm going to go over both component sets, but we'll start with the Annihilation set here. So again, this gives you the extra duration and also makes you do more damage as you lose health. So the things you're going to want to look for on this set is MP recovery out of combat and max health on your auxiliary power. Absolutely must have max mana on your Annihilation sensor. And then the other thing you want is MP recovery in combat. This one is very important. You need to make sure you have both of these. For this, the main thing you really want is just the defense. MP recovery modifier actually only applies to drops from mobs, so it's not going to do a whole lot for you in terms of boss fights. But if you're using this outside of a boss fight, then this can definitely be helpful. But you definitely want to make sure you at least have the defense roll here. Shield recovery modifier, that would also be good on this as well. And then for your last piece, you're going to definitely want the max shield at the very least. And then this also comes with a shield recovery modifier, so if you can get that as well, that's great. I don't have one, so I just have one with toxin, so I'm using that, but that would be the best. The important thing here though is definitely the shield. I'll go through the Frozen Heart set as well, but it's basically the exact same principles here. So again, this gives you the extra cooldown and the extra damage as you buff your teammates. Again, you want HP and recovery out of combat on your auxiliary power. This one's always the most important piece. You want max MP and MP recovery in combat. Again, for this, the defense is the big thing here, but shield recovery in combat is also going to be really nice. So that's the other thing you want to shoot for. And for your processor, again, you want to try to get the shield, and then shield recovery modifier would be the other best thing. So these are the complete best rolls on this set, the ones that I just showed you here. So obviously this set is pretty hard to farm. It comes from Frostwalker. So if you don't have it or don't have a good setup for it, just use an Annihilation set. And if you don't have either, just use whatever you have that you can put together. And as far as weapons go, again, I usually use the Enduring Legacy. I'll pop my build up here real quick. I'm not going to go over it. I have a video on that if you guys want a more in-depth explanation. This is my Enduring Legacy build here. And then here is my Greg's build as well. I use this sometimes, but I don't find it nearly as useful as just using the Enduring Legacy. This is better for like speed killing a Devourer, but that's about it. And that is it for the build. Now I'm going to show you guys some examples of using this build both in solo and group play. So I did a bunch of different bosses so I can show you just how powerful it actually is. Now one thing I can't really show you is the extra damage it's giving my teammates, but you can see how much damage I'm doing myself and kind of see how fast the bosses are actually melting. And then I'll give you guys a quick sample of something you can do for mobbing if you really want to use this build for mobbing. So stay tuned for that at the end here. So as per tradition, we're going to do 2 Devourer kills here first. One's going to be with the Enduring Legacy and one's going to be with the Greg's. So here is the kill with Greg's, and obviously Greg's is a very RNG weapon, so you could get a kill that's like 5 seconds or one that's like 15. And then here is an example with the Enduring Legacy, and you can see just how much damage it's doing and how the crit rate is just insane. Again, we have about an 85% crit rate, so it just melts. And here is the end of a Dead Bride run, a group run that I did. And you can see just how much damage I'm actually outputting here, as well as my team. Just look how fast she's melting because they're all just buffed. And I will show you guys the results here. But we actually had 2 immunity phases and still were able to beat the boss in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And I was able to put out 53 million damage, which is a lot because the boss in total has 75 million health. And here's an Obstructer example here. So I have put my buffs down, activated my ultimate for my team, and you can just see the Obstructer is not having a very good time here at all. You can see how fast he's melting. So, and we do end up killing him before the actual immunity phase. And as you can see, that was a nice little 26-second Obstructer. Now, obviously, my team was optimal and doing a ton of damage, but me being able to amplify them let us completely melt that thing. And I also did over 20 million damage myself. And here's one last example. This is a solo one on the Pyromancer. Now, I'm just going to shoot him until he goes into his immunity phase and show you guys that it really does not matter because of how strong this build is here. And boom, his immunity phase is done. I'm gonna go ahead and put my buffs down and rebuff here. And he won't be living for too much longer. That was about a 30-second Pyromancer kill there. So there you guys go. Very strong build in both solo and group content. This character is just insane. And the last thing here, if you do want to use this build for mobbing, you're going to throw on a launcher, copy the mods that I have here. If you have a better launcher, great. But I'm just using the Civgors. And all you're going to do is the same gameplay loop you've been doing. You're going to drop your supply Firearm Enhancer for each magazine you have and keep popping your buff. And you want to try to get the mag size on the launcher as large as possible. And boom, you have a mobbing setup on Enzo. And that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed yet and you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. If not, totally okay. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for the continued support here. Also, shout out to the people who have been supporting me on the Next On Creator program. I'm going to leave links in the description below for those. If you guys have not registered a creator for the Nexon program, please consider registering me if you enjoy my content. The next build I'll be working on is going to be for Eugen, and that's going to be out coming this week, so stay tuned for that as well. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.